Ever imagined, like, actually touching a centuries-old Tibetan thangka? Feeling all those little details? Or what about, like, walking through a Himalayan monastery,
Hmm.
but, like, never even leaving your living room?
Right.
Today, we're going to take a deep dive into how technology
Huh?
is changing the world of Tibetan art.
It's pretty
It's
wild.
giving it this whole new life and reach.
Exactly. It's not just like scanning things in for like safekeeping.
Yeah.
We're talking about using tools like 3D printing to like actually recreate those textures.
Mm.
So you get a real tactile experience. It's
Yeah.
not just visuals anymore.
So we're looking at this article from TATANKA,
Right?
and they talk about this technique called photogrammetry.
Oh, yeah, photogrammetry.
And artists are using this to capture like crazy detailed 3D models of these thangkas.
Yeah, it's amazing.
They use software to basically stitch together hundreds of photos.
Mm-hmm.
And they get this accuracy that like a few years ago would have been impossible.
Totally.
Yeah.
And think about it. Those models aren't just like flat images on a screen.
Right.
Imagine like a student, on the other side of the world studying a thangka in VR.
Oh.
They can zoom in to see each brushstroke or even rotate the whole thing to understand its form in 3D.
That's incredible.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah. This kind of access really opens up all these new ways to learn and do research.
Totally agree.
It's like you can take a virtual field trip to a museum,
Mm-hmm.
but this museum could have every thangka ever made.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a huge tool for preserving this culture, especially considering how fragile some of these artworks are.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just about holding on to the past.
Yeah.
Some artists are taking those 3D models and printing them.
Okay.
They use materials like resin to capture the texture of the original painting.
Huh.
You can actually run your hand over it and feel those brushstrokes.
Wow. So it's not just a visual copy, it's tactile too.
Exactly. It's a whole other dimension to the art.
It makes me think about people who can't see.
Oh, yeah.
They might not be able to appreciate the visual beauty, but through 3D printing, they could actually feel it.
You're totally right. That's a great point.
Yeah.
This technology can make art forms way more inclusive, accessible to so many more people.
Definitely.
And speaking of being inclusive,
Yeah.
let's talk about how VR is being used to create these really immersive experiences.
Yeah, the article mentions this project where you can walk through a Tibetan monastery.
Oh, yeah.
You hear the monks chanting and see the sunlight coming through the prayer flags.
It's like you're actually there.
Exactly. And it's not just about recreating the physical space.
No.
Imagine virtually taking part in a ceremony or ritual,
Oh, wow.
experiencing the sounds, the movement, the whole atmosphere.
That's something you couldn't get from just a photo or video.
No way. It's a whole other level.
But wouldn't it be hard to capture the spiritual side of a ritual in a virtual world?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Some developers are working directly with monks and spiritual leaders to make sure the VR experiences are respectful and authentic.
Mm-hmm. They're using traditional chanting music, even guided meditations, to create that sense of reverence and immersion.
So it's not just about the tech itself.
Right.
It's about using it in a way that respects the traditions behind the art.
Exactly.
Which brings us to 𝗧𝗎, a young Tibetan artist featured in the TATANKA article.
Oh, 𝗧𝗎's story is fascinating.
Yeah.
She's a great example of how an artist can bridge tradition and technology. She was trained in thangka painting,
Right.
but initially she really struggled with using modern tools in her work.
I can imagine that. It must be a hard balance,
Yeah.
wanting to be innovative, but also true to these centuries-old techniques.
For sure. At first, 𝗧𝗎 saw technology as like a threat
Right.
to the traditions she valued.
Yeah.
But when she started experimenting with 3D modeling and VR,
Okay.
she realized these tools could actually make her art even better,
Wow.
give it new dimensions, and help it reach more people.
So instead of replacing tradition, she found a way to use tech to enhance it. The article said she started using 3D printed elements in her thangkas,
Yeah.
creating this cool mix of physical and digital.
It's really innovative.
And she's also designing VR experiences based on her paintings.
Right.
So you can step inside the landscapes and symbols of her art.
Like taking a journey through her vision.
And it seems like this approach is working.
It is.
The article says she's got investors now
Wow.
who want to support her work and help promote Tibetan art around the world.
That's great.
It shows how combining tradition and technology can be powerful,
Yeah.
not just creatively, but for business too.
Hold on.
Okay, so we've got these 3D printed thangkas you can touch,
Yeah.
VR monasteries to explore.
Mm-hmm.
and this young artist, 𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗔𝗡𝗞, pushing the boundaries.
It's exciting.
Where do we go from here?
Well, these technologies are amazing, but they also bring up questions.
Okay, like what?
Like about who owns this digital stuff and if it could be misused.
Right. We need to be sure that these advances help the Tibetan community and don't just become a way to profit off their culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll be talking more about that in our next segment.
That's an important point to consider.
For sure.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.
We'll be exploring how young Tibetans are using digital tools to connect with their heritage and share it with everyone.
Can't wait.
So we've seen how 3D printing and VR are giving new life to Tibetan art.
Yeah.
Now let's look at how the younger generation is using tech to shape their culture's future.
It's amazing to see these young Tibetans. They're blending ancient traditions with modern digital tools.
Right.
It's not just about inheriting a culture.
Yeah.
They're actively changing it, too.
The TATANKA article lists 15 ways they're doing this.
15?
15. It's like a cultural renaissance, but with pixels and algorithms.
I like that.
Yeah.
One of the clearest examples is social media.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine a young musician in some remote village.
Okay.
Suddenly, they can share their music with millions of people on TikTok.
It's kind of like a digital version of that old nomadic storytelling.
Right.
Where songs and stories traveled huge distances.
Exactly. Except now the audience is global.
And it's not just for fun.
Oh, definitely.
These platforms are also being used to save languages.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
There are apps that teach Tibetan.
Cool.
They use games and interactive stuff to make it fun.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
It's like having a language tutor right in your pocket,
Exactly.
helping keep a language alive even when it's facing pressure.
And language is more than just words. It
Mhm.
carries history, culture, identity
Right.
by making language more accessible through tech.
Yeah.
These young Tibetans are ensuring this heritage stays strong.
The article also mentioned digital archives,
Oh, yeah.
storing huge collections of literature, music, and historical documents.
It's like creating a digital backup of their cultural heritage.
Right, so it's safe from damage or being lost.
But it's also about making that knowledge available to anyone online.
So anyone with internet can access it.
Exactly. Imagine a researcher studying rare Tibetan manuscripts. But they don't have to travel to some faraway monastery.
Wow.
They can just access it from anywhere.
That opens up so many possibilities.
It does.
Think about the potential for collaborations.
Oh, yeah.
Tibetan scholars working with researchers from all over the world,
Right?
sharing ideas in real time.
A whole new level of cultural exchange.
This all sounds really positive.
It is.
But are there any downsides to this rapid digitization?
Well, we have to be aware of the potential problems.
Like what?
Who controls these digital archives?
Okay.
How do we ensure the information is accurate and presented respectfully?
That's really important. We need to make sure technology serves the Tibetan community
Yes,
and not just corporations or outside interests.
exactly. And we can't forget about the digital divide.
Right.
Not every Tibetan has the same access to technology or the internet.
That's true.
So how do we make sure these advancements aren't leaving people behind?
It reminds us that technology is a tool.
It is.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
Right.
We need to be careful about the consequences
Right.
and work towards making things fair for everyone.
Totally agree. And that brings us back to the geopolitical situation.
You mean Tibet's relationship with China?
Yeah, it's complicated and technology plays a role.
The article mentioned Chinese investors being interested in Tibetan art and tech projects.
It makes you wonder about their motivations.
It does. On the one hand, it could mean more opportunities for Tibetan artists,
True.
but there's also the risk of their culture being exploited.
It's a tough balance.
How do you encourage collaboration without sacrificing cultural integrity?
That's the challenge for young Tibetans today.
Yeah.
They're trying to preserve their heritage while shaping its future in this digital age.
And it sounds like they're facing those challenges head on.
Oh, they are.
They see technology as a way to empower themselves,
Mm-hmm.
to connect with their roots and share them with the world.
It's really inspiring.
What stands out to you most about their approach?
Their fearlessness. They're not afraid to experiment, to mix old and new, to push the boundaries of tradition.
It's a reminder that culture is always changing.
It is.
And these young Tibetans are leading the way.
They're shaping their heritage with vision and determination.
It's amazing to see. So we've talked about tech reviving Tibetan art
Mm-hmm.
and how young Tibetans are using it to connect with their heritage.
Right.
But there's another big piece to this story.
Yeah.
Climate change.
It's a huge factor.
We can't talk about Tibet's future without addressing it.
Absolutely. The Tibetan Plateau, that roof of the world,
Yeah.
it's incredibly vulnerable to climate change.
The TATANKA article really paints a stark picture.
It does.
Rising temperatures are melting glaciers super fast,
Yeah.
and that affects everything from water to the entire ecosystem.
Imagine these massive glaciers, these frozen reservoirs.
Okay.
They feed rivers that support life across Asia.
Wow.
As they shrink, the water flow changes,
Right.
leading to more droughts and floods.
And it's not just the water, right?
Nope. The article talks about nomadic herders. They rely on the grasslands, but the grasslands are drying out, becoming less productive.
So it's harder for them to live their traditional way of life.
Exactly. And as the permafrost thaws,
Oh, right.
it releases methane,
Uh-huh.
which is a really potent greenhouse gas.
So it speeds up climate change even more.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. But the article also mentions how technology might help,
Or
like to reduce these impacts.
one example is remote sensing.
Okay.
Satellites and drones with cameras and sensors can track changes in the glaciers, vegetation, and even wildlife.
So it's like having an eye in the sky.
Exactly. You can see the whole ecosystem and how climate change is affecting it.
Wow.
And that data is used for conservation efforts,
Okay.
early warning systems for disasters, and helping communities adapt.
The article talked about a project using drones to plant trees
Yeah.
in areas where forests have been cut down.
Pretty amazing, huh? Using tech to regrow the landscape.
That's incredible.
It shows how technology can help restore the environment.
And it's not just drones.
Right.
They're using mobile apps, too, to connect communities and share info about sustainable practices.
Like saving water and managing pastures.
So tech is empowering local communities
Yes.
to protect their environment.
It proves that solutions don't always have to come from governments.
Yeah.
They can come from the people directly affected.
But we have to be realistic.
Of course.
Climate change is a global problem.
It is.
It needs global action.
Technology can help, but it's not a magic solution.
Right. We need bigger changes.
Yes.
Like cutting greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Investing in renewable energy and sustainable development.
Those are key.
And that means countries working together, right?
Definitely. What happens in Tibet affects us all.
Yeah.
The melting glaciers, the water issues, the greenhouse gases.
It's all connected.
It all goes beyond borders.
That's a lot to think about,
It is.
but it's also a call to action.
For sure.
What can we do, even if we're far away from Tibet?
Every little bit helps, like supporting organizations fighting climate change,
Okay.
reducing our own carbon footprint, pushing for policy changes.
So we can all make a difference.
Absolutely. As we saw in this deep dive,
Yeah.
people are using their creativity and smarts to tackle these problems.
That's inspiring.
It gives me hope.
Me too. We have the knowledge and tools to create a better future.
We do.
It's up to us to use them.
This deep dive was just a glimpse into Tibetan life
Right.
and the challenges we all face,
Hopefully it made you curious
and inspired you to learn more.
to get involved and make a difference.
Thanks for joining us.
We encourage you to check out the resources in the show notes
And keep the conversation going.
about art, technology, culture, and our planet.
I get.